Hello and welcome to episode 20 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltandPA.com. You know, it sounds kind of funny saying that, episode 20. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, 20 doesn't seem like that much, but when you associate a time frame with it, it's one episode a week, so 20 weeks, what's that, close to 5 months I've been doing this? It's incredible. It's been a lot of fun, and I really had no idea that it's been that long. Let's hope for another stress-free and free-flowing 20 episodes. So anyway, with this episode, I guess I should give you a little disclaimer. I don't like doing it, but every now and again I feel the need to remind you that I'm not a professional shooter, I'm not any kind of gun historian, I'm not professional gun anything. What I do to earn a living has nothing to do with guns, and all this podcast is essentially, it's my opinion, no more, no less, and you kind of get what you pay for it. It's a free podcast, and take it for what it's worth, and that's just kind of what it is, just my opinion. So with that said, let's get to talking about guns. I hate rambling on and kind of feeling like I'm getting all tied down with the disclaimer, because it just kind of feels weird reminding you that I'm not a professional gun guy. You can tell that just by listening to me talk. But before we get into too much, or before we get into the news and kind of the meat and potatoes of the podcast, I want to talk a little bit about, I want to do another knife update, and I think this is going to be the last knife update for the Buck Bantam Medium 285. Now, I received a message on Facebook today from Miguel, and real nice, reminding me that not everyone can see the video, because several of you, or many of you actually, almost more than are watching the video, are listening to the audio feed, and you really can't see the knife when I'm holding it up and I'm saying, hey, look at this knife. You really can't see what I'm talking about. So he asked that I go into a little bit more detail on the knife, so that's what I'm going to do. This is the Buck Bantam 285, and it is 3/8 of an inch, or it's 3 1/8 drop point, 420 HC stainless steel. It's got a textured thermoplastic handle with contoured finger groove. There would be your contoured finger groove. Stainless steel belt clip, which is back here. You can insert oohs and ahs as I show you the stuff on the camera. Not that the audio people will be able to hear me, but hopefully this, or not that the audio people will be able to see what I'm doing with the knife, but hopefully this little extra explanation lets you get a better visual of what I'm waving around in front of the camera. When closed, this knife is 4 3/8 long, 1.5 inches tall, and 1 inch thick. I would imagine that the 1 inch thick also includes the belt clip on the back side, because there's no way the body of this knife is 1 inch. So it must include the high point of the belt clip. The weight is 2.8 ounces, and to my amazement, I checked the price on this when I was looking up some details, and on Amazon this knife is $14.88, which kind of blew me away. I had no idea that the knife was this inexpensive. In addition to the features that I mentioned, there's also a lanyard hole on the back. You can attach a lanyard and hang it around your neck, or attach it to your pocket or something. And as I mentioned before, in the blade portion of the knife, there are studs on either side of the blade to aid in one-handed opening. And because they're on both sides of the blade, it makes the knife kind of ambidextrous. I'm really bad with opening it in my left hand. It just feels really weird. But that is the knife, more or less. The molded thermoplastic handle is something that I really, really dislike at this point. As I mentioned in a previous podcast, when you get a good grip on the knife, which is comfortable, by the way, the molded finger groove fits my hand really well, and when I'm holding the knife loosely in my hand, it feels very comfortable. It feels like it's a natural fit, and it's no big deal. I can do whatever I need to with the knife, and it's comfortable. Even though the belt clip is kind of in the meaty part of my hand, it's still pretty comfortable in the hand. But when you're doing something that's strenuous or requires a little extra effort to cut, the soft thermoplastic handle starts moving around something scary. I was just kind of playing with the knife earlier, holding onto the blade and then getting a good strong grip on the on the body of the knife, the grip, and just sort of twisting it and moving it. And it's amazing how much this grip moves around in your hand. I can only imagine being out in the woods or something and doing something that required a lot of force, and just I would be scared to death of this knife breaking, or the thermoplastic handle piece coming completely apart. It's amazing how much it moves and flexes in your hand when you get a good grip on it. That has been my largest complaint. Outside of that, the stud that allows you to open the blade ambidextrously seems to be a little too far back on the blade, and what it seems to be happening is when I go to open it, it takes a tremendous amount of effort to get the blade to begin opening. Once you get it so far, it pops open without any issue, but it's really tough to overcome that initial spring and get the blade open. It's nowhere near as easy as I find the Spyderco knives to be in the opening and closing department. Another thing that I was getting used to with the Spyderco knives is, you hit the release and kind of let the weight of the blade fall forward. Well, with the Spyderco knives, they're oriented in such a way that when the knife or when the blade falls, it doesn't like poke your finger. You don't get hit with the sharp edge of the blade. In this case, you do, because how far down the blade is sharpened. I guess if you're not a knucklehead and trying to to close the knife quickly and actually use both hands, it's not going to be an issue. Those are really my only complaints, is just the location of the stud and the grip. Outside of that, the knife has been really good. The fit and finish isn't nearly as nice as the Spyderco knives, and seeing that the price is $14.88, now I completely understand why. But if you look at the blade where it's machined in both places, where it's actually thinned out to make the point, and on the back side where it's got this sort of decorative cut along the back side to thin out the tip of the blade, you can see machine marks in it in both places. And even if you look at the very edge of the knife, the actual sharp section where it's ground down into a point, you can see machine marks. So fit and finish wise, I guess you get what you pay for. It's not like the Spyderco Native 4, which is gleaming. This is the Delica, and even this is, the fit and finish is much better. So I guess you're getting what you pay for. With a $15 knife, you're making some sacrifices in quality and fit and finish and things like that. For the money, for $15, I think this is a hell of a knife. It's worked really well for me. I haven't run into any real issues. I mean, little quirks here and there that I don't like. Like the handle, I guess, is more than a quirk, with it being flexible. Taking a little extra effort to actually open the blade is a little bit of a quirk that you got to get over. The blade seems to stay sharp fairly well. I mean, I haven't done any really heavy cutting with it. The only real complaint is, the only carry complaint that I have, is that it seems to slide around on my pocket quite a bit, and I think it's just the clip design, because it's tapered and it's only really contacting the pocket and pinching it against the knife frame in one little spot at the very end. I think that allows it to kind of slide around in the pocket. Outside from that, for the money, I think this is a good knife for 15 bucks. I don't think you can go wrong. I think it's a good, solid buy. Not my ideal choice, but definitely a good, solid knife for $15. I'm finished with this knife. I'm gonna stop carrying it at this point. I may add it into the rotation at some point, but I'm gonna go back to the Spyderco Delica 4 for the time being. I did order another knife. It was a spur-of-the-moment Black Friday purchase. I ordered a knife from Midway. It was on sale. I thought, that's a good price. I think I'll order a couple for Christmas gifts, and I'll get one for myself. And now that I have it, and I've been spoiled with these better knives, seeing the knife, I just dread having to carry it around. It's such a large form factor and things like that. So maybe I'll carry it at some point. Maybe I won't. I don't know. But for the time being, I'm going back to the old faithful, my absolute favorite knife of the bunch, the Spyderco Delica 4. Even though the Native 4 is more expensive and the fit and finish is better, and it just looks really nice, and it fits the hand really well. You know, for a utility blade, I just really like this Delica. It's just such a nice knife. So it's going back in my pocket. I've got one other thing to talk to you about before we get into the news. So I'm going to take a quick break. I better light this cigar because it's a monster, and I should have done that about 10 minutes ago. So sit tight. I will be right back. Alright, well, I am back. And, you know, before I get into talking about that second little kind of discussion topic I wanted to do before we get into the news, I want to make mention that all of the knives that I received, all three of them, the Buck Bantam medium 285, I believe, the Spyderco Native 4, and the Spyderco Delica 4, all three of those knives came from a listener of the podcast, Kasian Blaze. Really nice guy, regular on the site, comments quite a bit. Just kind of a knife guy through and through. He has a ton of YouTube videos featuring both knives and guns. He's real fun to watch. He's got a real sort of I don't want to say bubbling personality, but real nice guy, down to earth. And you know, I want to thank him very, very much for sending me those knives several weeks ago. You know, I talked about wanting to get into doing like an everyday carry knife, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to buy. I was looking at a couple of different brands, and I was asking for suggestions on Twitter, and I mentioned it on the podcast. And then Kasian Blaze put some knives together and sent them off to me. I was blown away by the package. Again, I really, really appreciate that, and I can't thank you enough. That was awesome. You've given me a tremendous education on how different knives carry, and you've really opened up my mind to everyday carry knives, and now I'm kind of eager to get into different knives and things like that. So thank you again, Kasian Blaze. So now on to the last little thing I wanted to talk about. A few podcasts ago I mentioned that I shot, you know, what was probably going to be my last USPSA match of the season. And for the most part, or actually it was, I did shoot another match actually yesterday, and it was kind of interesting. It's what is best called, or what it is very, very informal. I mean, there are scores taken, but they mean absolutely nothing. Time isn't taken, or, you know, we're not recording time or anything like that. There's just a little informal, I wouldn't even call it a match. It's probably best described as a shoot at one of the local clubs. It's $10 for members of the club, $15 if you're not a member of the club. You come out. It's a two-gun match. There's a pistol portion, a rifle portion, and I think if there's time left over, they will mix the two, where you're transitioning from pistol to rifle and things like that. I've gone to two of these matches. I don't have a rifle to take with me, so I only shoot half of the match, and you know, it's been a lot of fun. But you know, now I can see why in the Pennsylvania area, in this general region, things really slow down for USPSA. So I get up yesterday morning, Sunday morning, I look out the window. It's still kind of dark, but you know, I don't see snow or rain or anything like that. So the weather looks fairly well early in the morning. So I start getting my stuff ready. You know, I get my contour camera, make sure it's charged, make sure I have enough storage space on the camera to record, you know, probably 15 minutes of total footage. I make sure I have a little handheld backup camera for whatever reason. I get my gun packed away. You know, I make sure I have enough ammo. I go through, you know, the whole routine. And then a few minutes before I walk out the door, I look out the window again. Clear, the sky is clear, it's nice and blue, it looks really nice out. So I pack up my stuff and I head out the door. I walk out the door and think, wow, you know, it's kind of chilly out here. But, you know, it's still early in the morning yet. You know, we're shooting at 9. By that time, you know, the sun will be out, it'll warm up a little bit. You know, it'll be good and comfortable. All I'm wearing is a hooded sweatshirt, pair of pants, and sneakers. I head down to the car, I get all loaded up, and I leave. And I go meet up with a buddy of mine, Scott. We were going to carpool over to the range. So I get up, I meet Scott, and he's kind of bundled up, and we head over to the range. Now, where I live, I'm kind of up against a mountain, and this mountain does really weird things. Sometimes it shields us from the weather, and sometimes it seems like it directs the weather right at us. Well, this time it must have shielded us from the weather. There wasn't a single snowflake anywhere when I left my house. when I got 10 miles away to the club on the other side of the mountain, half an inch of snow on the ground. It doesn't sound like much, half an inch. We get in October we had over a foot, or we had about a foot. So, you know, half an inch really isn't much, but it was much colder on the other side of the mountain than I was expecting. So I was freezing this whole time. I'm wearing a sweatshirt, just a pair of pants, and sneakers. My feet are cold, my legs are getting cold. I didn't bring any gloves. I didn't even bring a hat, and I usually keep extra stuff in my car. For whatever reason, I took it out. So we get to this match. We start shooting around 9. I guess we got done around 11, and by that time, I was freezing. I had to keep my hands in my pockets just to keep them warm, and then when it was time to shoot, I'd pull them out, and I'd shoot. As soon as I was done, they go back in my pockets. They stayed in my pockets until it was time to paste targets, and then they came out long enough to grab stickers out of my sweatshirt, my hoodie pocket, and slap them on there and get my hands back in. I was struggling to get the little stickers off of the paper and onto the target. It was an experience in cold weather shooting that I hadn't had before. So now I kind of understand why we don't do USPSA matches in the winter, when, you know, temperatures are, I don't know, probably in the high 20s, low 30s. It was fun, but really cold. And we got to do some interesting stuff. One of the stage descriptions said point shoot, and you know, I thought I knew what point shooting was, or at least I think I knew what point shooting was. I do it at close range targets. Bring the gun up, you shoot. You don't look at the sights, but you bring the gun out and you shoot. We had a shooting from the hip, and if you've ever tried that, it's amazing how difficult it is. All the shots that I took from the hip, the only shots I got on target were probably by accident. And I could probably count on one hand out of the 20-some shots that we took from the hip that I actually got onto the target. And we were only about 10 yards away, shooting at I guess it was like half-size torso, or a reduced torso target. And it was amazing how difficult it was. And in that case, when we're shooting one-handed, I have my other hand in my pocket to keep it warm. But, you know, we did some interesting stuff. There was some traditional style shooting, some shooting on the move. That was all cool, and it was a good time. So, cold weather shooting, not so fun, but it was really nice to get out to the range after doing so much dry fire practice. You know, I wanted to finally get something down the barrel of the gun, and you know, it was much needed trigger time, and it was fun. Welcome to the news segment of the podcast. Basically, this is just as it sounds. It is news. Over the past week, I've been keeping an eye out on Google Reader, in which case I use Google Alerts to create an RSS feed that I dump into Google Reader, and the Google Alert is set up to use a bunch of keywords. I believe it's something like gun, pistol, gun or rifle or pistol or firearm or shotgun, or a bunch of other firearm-related terms. And then the word the word and then something, you know, stuff like self-defense, things like that. So it helps me filter just the ton of stuff that comes in through Google News, and it allows me to kind of refine it down to gun-related stuff. And the news is generally derived from stuff that I pick through a couple of these Google Alerts RSS feed things that I have set up. Some of them I pick up through Twitter from sites like, or users like the NRA blog, the NRA ILA stuff. All of these Twitter accounts that post self-defense stories and things like that. So when I see them, I'll click through, and if they interest me, I'll put them into the list of news items for the week. This week I have 3, and the first one is one that you probably heard of already, and that is Bloomberg online gun sting creates more questions than answers. This comes from theexaminer.com, and this was published on December 15th. It goes on to say, probe finds illegal gun web, the Wall Street Journal reports. And behind the probe is a familiar anti-gun figure. And then in quotes, as if this is referenced from something else, it says, Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who in 2006 launched a national campaign to combat illegal guns, authorized the city to hire licensed private investigators to go undercover and purchase guns via internet listings. And then we kind of go out of the quote box into, naturally, the authorized journalists are behind him. From a consistent ally in citizen disarmament, the New York Daily News. Mayor Bloomberg rightfully takes aim at online gun sales. All you need to know about their mindset and the chance for a fair analysis. Now amid presidential race, the gun crazies are in full insane command. Now we go back to the art. There's a lot of these little like comment blocks. I'm not quite sure what they're supposed to mean or do, but anyway, now we get down into the real bunch of article, and it goes on to say, so Bloomberg has financed another sting in other states. That is, the taxpayers of his fiefdom have. Except this time, it's not gun dealers he's trying to ruin, it's private sellers. And it's in states that haven't threatened him with criminal prosecution if he tries his antics there. Like Virginia, which explains why he then turned around and used his war chest for political revenge. So much for the claim of anti-gunners that we need home rule. That's just code. They want you to rule your home anyway. They want to rule your home anyway. This is kind of a weird article, so I apologize if I'm stumbling all over it. And that's the case with this latest publicity stunt, one that at least takes the mask off of the lie that the anti-self-defense lobby wants to close a mythical gun show loophole. Their true immediate goal is to end all private sales and use that as the beachhead from which to launch their next assault. To coordinate this latest campaign, Bloomberg and his disproportionately criminal mayors against illegal guns. Man, this thing is really hard to read because it has like a statement, and then in quotation marks it has the author's opinion on top of the statement. So it just doesn't flow when you try to read it. But anyway, in parentheses, it says, keep in mind he would like for all of them to be illegal, except for those under his control, end parentheses, have launched a Delete Online Outlaws page to fix their gun checks website, where they share recorded results of staged undercover operations. On the surface, these videos look damning. On closer examination, we see that they're not being treated free of subtle manipulation. Case in point, the very first video title in the lineup tells us Ohio seller on armslist.com sells assault rifle. The thing is, it involves a Ruger Mini 14, a rifle not included in the federal 1994 assault weapons ban. In parentheses, and again, it says, and that exemption incidentally caused no small amount of controversy among gun rights activists, end parentheses, no matter, to the antis, they're all assault weapons, unless they're magically transmuted into patrol rifles by virtue of who controls them. As for the sellers caught on video, we don't have information to know if they're just ordinary people who are ignorant or if any of them are criminals. In one clip, where the fake buyer says he probably couldn't pass a background check, the seller laughs and says that he probably couldn't either, which leads us to the jaw-dropping conclusion that criminals don't obey the law, in Ohio, in Texas, or in New York City. Does anyone seriously think an investigation couldn't make and record street buys there, in spite of the edicts commanding otherwise, and that Bloomberg's finest wouldn't ruin the life of anyone trying to set up and record a reverse expose? So what does these gotcha stunts really prove? For one thing, they prove a man desperate to control others with a single-minded fanaticism, and everyone else be damned. Another case in point to illustrate, look at the goals Bloomberg and his group are calling for. In one bullet point, registration of all sellers. It's not like we haven't already seen how New York City misuses this information. Bullet point 2, registration of buyers before they can even control the sellers. No transaction needs to take place. Bloomberg demands to know who's inquiring, like we don't have an absolute right to talk to any damn person we feel like, about any damn thing we please, any damn time we feel like it. And it doesn't have a damn to say about any of that. Well, why should someone who spits on the Second Amendment care about the First? The third bullet point, provide a simple mechanism to flag suspicious behavior in gun sales. Bloomberg's Inspector Colossal Solution. He suspects everyone and he suspects no one. I'm just waiting for him to tell a blind beggar that his minky is breaking the loo. If he can force these requirements on internet transaction, does anyone think he'll be content to stop there? And does anyone think that any of this nonsense will have any effect whatsoever on the violent criminal underclass spawned and adapted to flourish in the by design environment Bloomberg and his political cartel counterparts at the state and federal level rely on? That was a mouthful and difficult to read out loud. Kind of difficult to kind of get your head around it when you're actually sitting here reading it silently anyway, because there's so much separate stuff interjected in the article. It just kind of bounces around and stuff. But anyway, unless you've been living under a rock, there was this big, stir as of late where Bloomberg put together this sting where these private investigators were going on Craigslist, on Arms List. I think Glock Talk may have even been on the list of places where they were calling, but they were going to the classified sections of all these places and contacting people about guns they had for sale. And then I guess the whole gotcha part of it was during the conversation. I listened to one or two of them. The private investigator says that he probably couldn't pass a background check, and in all of the clips that they have shown or they play, the seller either says, I couldn't either, or he kind of laughs, or he doesn't seem to care one way or the other. And they're saying that, well, because of this, these people should have known better, and yada yada yada. And I guess if it were me, if I were selling a firearm and someone called me up and said, hey, I saw your ad, I want to buy your gun. And they said, and they laughed, jokingly said, I probably couldn't pass their background check. I don't know that I would be comfortable selling them the gun. However, a background check is required. Long guns in Pennsylvania doesn't require a background check. But if you have reason to believe that this person isn't permitted to own firearms, you're not supposed to sell them the firearm. So there's like a personal liability there. However, handguns, they all have to go through a background check. So what do I care whether or not this person says he can or can't pass a background check? It's up to the federal firearms license guy, the guy with the FFL, to determine whether or not the guy can buy the gun. So, if I feel as though this person may not be able to purchase the gun and he's out of state, I don't want to eat the shipping costs of sending that gun out to the guy's FFL. I'm obviously not going to send it to his house, but when I ship it to his dealer, it could go down where I'm out shipping or something like that. But then again, the buyer generally pays for that stuff. So he sends me money, I pack up the gun, I send it to the dealer. If he can't legally take possession of the gun, well, maybe I gotta give the. I guess morally I should give the guy his money back and not let the firearm dealer, deal with it, because if he can't take possession of the gun, they're gonna send it back to the rightful, or they're gonna send it back to the person that sent it out to begin with. So, in the grand scheme of things, really, what difference does it make whether or not the guy on the other end says, I probably couldn't pass the background check? If he said, I can't pass the background check, maybe I'd feel a little different about it. But as long as there's an FFL involved, and I'm willing to deal with the hassles that may come with him potentially not being able to pass their background check, I don't really see what the difference is. So I think they're making a mountain out of a molehill here, because I think, and probably 95% of the purchases they were trying to set up were all going to involve an FFL dealer anyway, or someone with an FFL license. So there should be no reason for the gun to fall in the wrong hands. It's not like, okay, kind of coming at this from a different angle. Guy calls me up, says he probably can't pass the background check. I send gun to the FFL. I probably have to send information as to who's going to be receiving the gun and things like that. And if someone else shows up to pick up the gun, it's going to seem kind of shady on the FFL's end. So, what's going on there? it should be rejected as a potential straw purchase, and the gun should probably find its way to my doorstep again, in which I have to refund the money. So again, it seems like this is being thwarted, and it's not nearly as big a deal as Bloomberg's investigators are making it out to be, or all the videos are making it out to be. But that's just one person's opinion. Well, with the first piece of news out of the way, hopefully I'm done bumbling and stumbling all over these things, but the second piece of news comes from The Dispatch. It covers Columbus, Mississippi, and the Golden Triangle. And it is entitled, Pistol Packin' Mamas Hone Shooting Skills in Safety Class. And it was published on December 17th, and I read it today, and actually, I just could not get my head around a part of this news article, and I actually made a post on Twitter quoting a part of the article, and I asked, how could this possibly happen? Well, I'll get to that as I read it. I don't want to kind of spoil the news article by telling you what I found so confusing. But at any rate, the article goes on to say, shots rang out early Saturday morning in Columbus East End, but crime wasn't afoot. The frosty air crackled with ammunition rounds as city women, hoping to improve their gun savvy, took aim at targets at the police department's shooting range. The 8 women gathered for practice and to learn how to defend themselves. I like guns, said Sheila Long of Columbus. I just need to learn some safety. Long said she is a deer hunter and came for practice. She fired a .380 caliber pistol at the blue outline of a human. The .380 and 9mm are the most popular personal defense weapons, according to Dick Metcalf, technical editor for Shooting Times magazine. Sergeant James Grant with Columbus Police Department taught the class. Gun safety, really, it's simple. The evidence was in the 10-minute tutorial he gave the women. Grant said people should never point a trigger at something they don't plan to destroy, and they should not pull the trigger until they are ready to destroy. Written in chalk on the blackboard was the reminder, quote, you are responsible for a projectile, unquote, or end quote. Once on the range, Grant stood between the 2 women at a time and watched them shoot from about 10 feet. Load back up and shoot you another round, he says. Willa Savelli from Columbus came to learn how to protect herself. We've had so many break-ins in our neighborhood that I thought it would be good to know. She sported a bloody knuckle from having her thumb in the wrong place when she fired her .22 caliber pistol. That's the part where I got really confused, and I'll talk more about that later. Grant handed her target and said, "You got him every time." Savelli said, "If he's big, she'll be fine." She said she was disappointed with her performance because her rounds made a circle around the kill zone. One of her shooting partners offered consolation and said at least she hit every major organ. Savelli said she grew up with guns. All men in my family hunt, and stressed gun safety. Mississippi ranks second in the nation in gun deaths, the Violence Policy Center announced in October. The center analyzed 2008 data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The state's gun death rate from suicides, homicides, and unintentional shootings is 19.32 people per 100,000. Alaska is ranked number 1. Mississippi is followed by Louisiana, Alabama, and Wyoming in the top 5. The Violence Policy Center in Washington, D.C. nonprofit. The Violence Policy Center is a Washington, D.C. nonprofit. Sorry, I got a little confused there. Its mission is to reduce gun deaths through research, advocacy, and education and collaboration. So, really good scenario at the heart of it. The part that really confused me was about how this woman hurt her knuckle. And when I read knuckle, I'm thinking like, you know, the knuckle below your thumbnail. I'm sitting in my office at work during a break, and I'm like orienting my hand around this imaginary pistol grip, and I'm thinking, how could she have possibly had her hand that she somehow clipped her knuckle on the slide of the gun when it came back? Because I'm assuming that it was a semi-auto pistol, and I don't know how she would have done it with a revolver. At the time, I was struggling to figure out how she could have possibly done it with a semi-auto. So we got to talking on Twitter, and there were a couple of people that mentioned that when they see new shooters shoot sometimes, you know, they get their hand around the grip, okay, but their support hand kind of gets goofy and their thumb winds up behind the slide, sort of like in line behind the slide, and when it comes back, it gouges their knuckle and bites them. When I've seen people get slide bite before, it's generally back here in the web between the thumb and index finger where they get bit. But you know, I'm just sitting there and I'm trying to figure out how the hell did this woman get hurt, and you never know. It's kind of interesting what happens when someone with inexperience starts handling a gun. And the part that really surprised me is, you know, these women were with a sergeant from the police department. So, you know, that confused me even more. You know, why didn't he teach her how to properly hold the gun? And then I'm reading that it's only a 10-minute session with two women. So he's standing in the middle. There's a woman on either side of him, and he's giving instruction on how to handle the firearm and shoot it in a whopping 10 minutes. The class that I took with my wife was like 5 or 6 hours long. So it's kind of amazing that they were able to do this class in 10 minutes. Obviously, there wasn't enough instruction, because at 10 feet, the woman should have been able to hit her target a little better. I mean, 10 feet is not really far. I mean, you could throw the pistol and hit the target at 10 feet, and it wouldn't take much effort. But at the heart of it, I really think this is a great idea. It would be great if more police departments in local communities did this type of thing. I mean, there is the argument of, well, why are the police spending money to educate women to defend themselves? You know, it's not their job and things like that. But I've heard of a lot of scenarios where police departments are volunteering their time. You know, they're not being paid to stand out there and teach these women how to do things. You know, I guess it does take up some police department resources and funding to do it, even if it's on a volunteer basis. But even so, you know, I think these are a really good idea, and I really wouldn't mind some of my taxpayer dollars going towards some of these education style classes. I know that's kind of a hot button issue, and some people would be grossly opposed to something like that. But you know, I personally wouldn't be upset if I found out that my local police department were doing, you know, maybe 4 or 5 of these classes a year, and it was costing me a couple of bucks out of my tax dollars to run these classes. You know, I think they're a really good idea. I just wish the class would have been a bit longer, and it would have been a bit more involved, because I'm kind of disappointed hearing that it was only 10 minutes. A woman hurt herself by not holding the gun properly, and a woman had difficulty hitting a human torso target at 10 feet. I mean, I guess she was hitting it in around the chest area, but just not being able to get it in the quote kill zone. I don't know. I like it at the core, but I just think it could have been done better. But then again, you know, this is coming from someone that just read this thing on the internet, and I don't know. It is what it is. I like it, but I wish it were done a little better. Well, for the last piece of news, I have a bit of local news. It was suggested before that I do some Pennsylvania-based news, and it's been really hard to come by, because there are a ton of shootings that go on in like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and all the cities in between, or cities and towns in between, but a lot of them aren't really self-defense stories, and they're kind of depressing. You know, guy with a gun robs a store, someone dies, robber gets away. You know, that's really not the type of story that I want to be talking about in these news articles. Fortunately, there was someone that shot the bad guy. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out so well. And this comes from NBC 10 Philadelphia, and it says, store clerk shoots would-be robber with his own gun. This was published on December 15th, and it's kind of short and sweet. It goes on to say, shots rang out during an apparent robbery in quiet Swarthmore, PA, Thursday afternoon. 2 people were shot around 2:45 after a man attempted to rob the Dollar Magic store at a strip mall on 725 Chester Road, Springfield Township, police said. A store clerk and the alleged robber were shot during the incident, police said. The clerk was able to wrestle the gun away from the suspect and then shoot the would-be robber in the groin, cops said. The clerk was hit in the shoulder, according to police. The suspect was in critical condition Thursday night, while the clerk was in stable condition. The Dollar Magic and Goodwill store next door were closed for the day following the incident. So that's it. Short and sweet. Guy comes in the dollar store, which is kind of confusing. I mean, of all the places to rob, why a dollar store? I guess it's a volume thing. You've got a whole bunch of people spending a little bit of money, and that equates to stacks of cash in the register, I guess is what the guy was thinking. So he goes into the dollar store. He winds up shooting the clerk in the shoulder. Fortunately, the clerk was able to wrestle the gun away from the guy and shoot him in the groin. And that's kind of where the news story ends. Police come, ambulances come, the would-be robber, or I wouldn't even call him a would-be robber. He tried to rob the place. He is the robber. The robber is in critical condition. Fortunately, the clerk is in stable condition. Not an ideal scenario, but it could have turned out much worse. I don't have a whole lot of experience with retail experience. I mean, when I was younger, I worked a couple of jobs in retail. 2 of those jobs I was actually running the cash register. The 3rd job I was doing odd things around the cash register, working the floor and things like that. So I mean, if I were to do that again, if I were to get a part-time job or something working at a Walmart or a CVS or insert any retail cashier position here, even though there would most likely be a no guns policy, I would probably carry anyway. In a retail environment, you're at increased risk for robbery, regardless of how big the store is. There are always chances of being robbed in a place that's dealing with money all the time. And I think this is a situation where it would be worth the risk to carry a gun in my pocket very discreetly for situations like this if they were to arise. I mean, if I was working like a second job and I didn't quote unquote need it to support my family, and I could get by not working that job, if it was kind of a part-time thing for extra money, I think it would be worth the risk. Even if it were my sole job, I still think it would be worth the risk. I just think you would need to be very discreet about it. I mean, you're not breaking any laws, you're just breaking company policy, and you're risking losing your job in the event that something happens. However, I think I think the option of self-defense outweighs the risk of potentially being shot and killed over the money in the cash register, because you really never know what these people are going to do. Even if you turn over the money, I mean, how many times have you heard on the news that someone was being robbed or mugged, they turn over the money and they get shot anyway? So you've got to assume the worst when someone's pointing a gun at you, or they're pointing a knife at you saying, give me the money. You've got to assume the worst, I would think. Or at least that's just the way I view the situation. So, not the best way for the story to end. It really sucks that the guy got shot, but I'm really glad that he was able to keep his bearings, wrestle the gun away from the guy, and shoot him back, and save his own life and the lives of anyone else in the store at the time. So, I think it's a good news story, although it's not real positive. Well, it is time for the featured content segment of the podcast. Much like the news, I rely heavily on Google Reader and the variety of our RSS subscriptions that I'm subscribed to pull interesting content from a variety of blogs and websites and podcasts and things like that. And I also utilize Twitter and Facebook, and basically I just kind of look for interesting stuff. When I find something interesting, I feature it here on the podcast, and the objective is not to read everything out to you like I do the news. It's basically just to give you enough information to pique your interest and get you to click through the little link that I have in the show notes, and have you read and check out this stuff for yourself, and kind of show some page view love to the people that generate interesting content, and help me get through the day, more or less. So the first piece of featured content I have comes from Miguel over at Gun Free Zone, and it is entitled CSGV, which is the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, Celebrating Lawbreakers. And in this particular piece of information, this news article, I know just enough about it to be dangerous. I tried to read up on a little bit of what was going on, and I found it difficult to pin down exactly what happened. This news article basically, or this piece of featured content basically highlights the fact that the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence is kind of celebrating the fact that Mark Meckler, who is from, he is the Tea Party Patriot co-founder, was arrested in New York for quote, trying to take a gun, or trying to board a plane with a gun, end quote. And from what I've read, this absolutely is not the case. It's not kind of the way they're skewing it. And the interesting thing about this article was that Miguel highlights this FOPA, which is Firearm Owners Protection Act, which basically says that if you are legally able to possess and or carry a gun in your home state, and you find yourself in another state via you were flying from one state where you're permitted to carry to another state where you're permitted to carry, and for whatever reason your plane is rerouted to another airport along the way, whether or not you have a connecting flight or a layover or something like that, it protects you in a state where you're not permitted to carry a gun anyway. So it keeps you safe in the event that your flight is derailed, or for whatever reason you find yourself in a gun unfriendly state, as far as what's that big word I'm trying to think of, reciprocity is concerned. So I don't remember where he was leaving from, or I think he was going to Detroit. But anyway, he was legally able to possess a firearm in his home state. He checked the gun in a locked container at the airport. He landed in New York, and then he was arrested in New York for having an unregistered firearm. Now, this is where things kind of get shady. I don't know why he was in New York. I don't know whether he was just passing through, or whether he was stopped, or whatever the case. It seems as though he was declaring his firearm. So it sounds as though he landed in New York, he left the security area with his bag, and then he tried to declare his firearm again through Delta in New York to get back on the plane and go to Detroit. This Firearm Owners Protection Act says it's okay as long as he doesn't have immediate access to the gun, and as long as he was quickly passing through. So if he had a layover in New York, it should be okay. It shouldn't be a problem. But if he stopped in New York, left the airport, he had a several-hour layover, so he decided to go, I don't know, go to a meeting or something, or go visit a friend in New York, and then come back to the airport with his gun, it seems as though that that Firearm Owners Protection Act does not protect him at that point, because he sort of veered from his flight path, so to speak. And the dangerous part is, I really don't know what was going on. I can't gather. I can't find whether or not he was just incidentally in New York and he was planning on leaving right away, or what the case was. But whatever the case was, he wasn't trying to board a plane with the gun. It was in a locked container. It wasn't like he was trying to carry his pistol on his hip into the plane and he got stopped at security and things like that. It seems as though he was trying to check the gun, and that's when all this stuff broke down. But to make matters worse, regardless of whether or not he was just passing through, or whatever the case was, from what I was able to gather, there are two states that are notorious for not following this federal law. And those states are, of course, New York and New Jersey. And apparently there are a lot of documented cases in which someone was just passing through New York, and they should have been covered under this Firearm Owners Protection Act, and they were arrested anyway. So this whole thing is kind of strange. The irritating part about this Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, the Facebook post says, quote, "Just another, quote, law-abiding gun owner, quote, folks, a concealed handgun permit holder, too, so obviously the most law-abiding." And that's kind of agitating, because on the surface it seems as though he should have been protected under this Firearm Owners Protection Act, but when you look into it a little bit further, I don't know where it goes. But anyway, the learning about this FOPA was new to me. I wasn't aware of it. You know, I assumed that there had to be some sort of protection in place for people that found themselves in a state that was not gun friendly, based on, you know, weather conditions, or the plane needing to land over an emergency or a problem or something like that. But, you know, I didn't know there was an actual law based on something like this happening. So head over to Gun Free Zone, read this information, and then sort of look into it yourself, and you'll see that things kind of get jumbled, and obviously there are two sides of every story, but the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence seems to be celebrating the fact that a law-abiding permit holder, quote, was arrested for having a gun when he shouldn't have, quote. Anyway, I found it really interesting, and it was a definite learning experience with the Firearm Owners Protection Act. So head over to Gun Free Zone, check out the post that Miguel has written out for you, and learn a little bit more about firearms and the act of being arrested in New York if you have one. For the second piece of featured content, I have a piece called Concealed Carry Myths from Shooting Illustrated. I think I came across this on Twitter, and I clicked through and read it, and it's a pretty interesting piece on concealed carry myths. When I was fairly new to firearms, a lot of these myths were ones that I believed. For instance, there's an entire piece on you should only carry when you need it, being a gun myth, obviously. And at one point in time, I remember I only carried my gun when I felt as though I was going into a shady area, or I was going out at night, doing grocery shopping at an odd hour, and then I had to go to the grocery store at midnight or something when my wife was pregnant. And these are the times where I felt as though I should probably carry, and when I was going out in broad daylight, I never really worried about it. And one day I had a friend talk to me about it, and he says, well, how often do you carry? And I said, oh, only when I feel as though I need it. And he kind of gives me this look, and he says, well, how often do you wear your seatbelt? I said, well, every time I get into my car, I put my seatbelt on, because you never know when I get it now. And then it clicked, and now I put on my gun whenever I leave the house. And then the article more or less explains, carrying a gun is like having an insurance policy. If you don't have the policy with you, it's not going to do you any good. Another example of a gun myth is that empty chambers are happy chambers, and this relies more on revolvers than semi-autos, although it does touch on that as well. But for a long time, I was of the opinion that if you're going to carry a revolver, the hammer should be on an empty chamber, just the way in case the hammer got bumped or banged or something, the gun would never go off when you're hip. And it wasn't until later on that I realized that, well, that's not the case. You're really reducing your percentage of ammunition if you load 4 rounds instead of 5. It's really important if you're carrying a revolver to make sure that every one of those chambers are loaded, because you've only got 5 rounds. You don't want to be taking one of those away just because the gun is safe. You don't need to carry it on an empty chamber, and you don't need to make sure that the first trigger pull the hammer drops on an empty chamber. That's just not the case. And there's also some other gun myths or concealed carry myths throughout this article. It's nothing that I haven't read before, or nothing that I don't believe now, but it was a nice kind of concealed carry 101 reminder of why we carry the way we do, and why some of these myths that we hear throughout our early carrying days are important to get over them, and start carrying the way you should with a loaded firearm, and all the time, not just when you think you're going to need it. And those are just two of several examples that are on here. There are as far as myths go, there are carry only when needed, empty chambers are happy chambers, women should only shoot 22s, practice gun zen, and the winning formula. So it's a decent article. I would guess 800 to 1,000 words. I mean, it's a fairly good read. It's well written, and there's lots of information here. So if you're interested in learning what some of these gun myths are, and seeing whether or not you fall into one of these myths, definitely head over to Shooting Illustrated and check out this article. I think it's well worth your time. Well, the last piece of featured content I have for you isn't a piece of content per se. It is a blog in general. Now, in my Google RSS reader, there are a couple of blogs, 3 of which come to mind immediately are AmmoLand, Gun Free Zone, and Shall Not Be Questioned, which is formerly Snowflakes in Hell. And these three blogs or websites are very pro-gun, and they look at the political side of things. They analyze what the other side of the issue is saying or are saying, and kind of filter out the nonsense and kind of let the pro-gun side shine through. And why I think these blogs are really important is because it doesn't matter whether you pick up a newspaper or you sit down and you watch, the action news in your area, primetime television. It seems as though it's 99% of the time it's anti-gun, and it's really frustrating to watch that kind of stuff. And these blogs give a good sense of balance. They filter out some of that crap, and then they let you see the issue kind of for what it is. Now, it's tough because there are extremists on both ends. You've got the pro-gun guys that believe that everyone should have guns. Not necessarily everyone, but everyone that has the proper mental capacity should own a gun, and guns are just tools. Guns don't kill people. And then on the other side, you have people that say, guns kill people. Not people don't kill people. Guns kill people. Guns kill innocent children. Basically, guns get up, run around, and shoot innocent people all the time. And obviously, that's my pro-gun slant on on the other end. But you've got these two sides of the story, and these blogs, the specific blog that I want to kind of feature here is Shall Not Be Questioned. I read it quite often, and I don't link to it or talk about it enough. And I think these blogs do a really good job of taking that incredible anti-gun slant and brushing away all that, quote, crap, unquote, end quote, and let you see the issue for what it is. For instance, I talked about the GSGV, the earlier piece of feature content that I talked about with Gun Free Zone. That's a great example of the other side skewing a particular scenario, and Miguel taking the time to say, no, that's not how it works. Here is kind of a neutral, not this, obviously he's pro-gun, but this is a more neutral way of looking at it. It's not nearly as bad as the media says it is, and I think Shall Not Be Questioned does a great job of shedding light on all this anti-gun stuff and allowing us pro-gun guys to see things for what they are. I think it takes a special person to be able to wade through all that anti-gun mudslinging and put up with it on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day in the case of Shall Not Be Questioned, and give you the scoop as to what's going on. I've tried to do it in the past, reading through all of the gun articles that hit my Google RSS news feed, and it is incredible how much is anti-gun and the skew that it gets. For instance, the Bloomberg private investigator thing, that GSGV, was it? Or no, the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, CSGV. There are a couple of examples where, if you pick up the newspaper or you watch primetime action news in your area, you always see that constant anti-gun skew, and I think these blogs do a great job of balancing out that skew towards anti-gun. I'm doing a horrible job of explaining how these blogs work and what they do, but I think they do, in the case of in the case of all of those blogs, but again, I want to feature Shall Not Be Questioned. I think they do a tremendous job of allowing us pro-gun folks to see what's going on without that anti-gun skew. So I don't want to butcher it too much or make these blogs sound, I don't want to portray these blogs in a bad light by saying, you've got extremists on both ends. I think they do a really good job, and you should definitely head over to Shall Not Be Questioned and check out all of the stuff that they have. They do a number of posts daily. For instance, today alone, almost the entire front page is everything from today. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 news items from December 19th. So that's a lot of posts in one day, where you're basically taking away that anti-gun slant and seeing it from a pro-gun light. So again, head over to Shall Not Be Questioned, check out what Sebastian and Bitter have to say on the subject, and read them often. For the cigar and drink pairing of the episode, I want to try to pare this down a little bit and make it a little condensed. I was just looking at the time, and I'm almost at an hour, and I've got this portion of the episode to go, plus a discussion topic that may get kind of lengthy. So I want to try to keep this kind of condensed. The coffee that I'm drinking is, it's still from that monster box of Folgers gourmet stuff that my wife bought. It's Keurig, the little Keurig canisters, and I'm pairing it with a Fuente Opus X. Now, I mentioned this particular cigar last episode when I did the Fuente Añejo, and I was telling you that I didn't have a large Opus X to do for the episode. That's what I wanted to do, but you know, I didn't have anything large enough to get through the episode. But Buckhead Cigar hooked me up with a big giant Opus X that I was able to smoke for the entire episode. But anyway, it's kind of 'tis the season for rare Fuente product to be coming out. Father's Day and around Christmas, Fuente releases these rare cigars. In the case of the Opus X, they range anywhere from, I don't know, maybe $11 up to about $17 or $18, depending on the vitola that you get. Some of the odd shapes, they do like a football cigar and things like that. They can get really expensive. This particular cigar, with a very high Georgia tobacco tax in place from Buckhead, is $20.75. So these aren't for the faint of heart as far as price is concerned, but because Christmas is right around the corner, and this is the last podcast I'll be doing before Christmas rolls around, I think this is a great special occasion cigar. They are expensive, however, I really think it's worth the treat to run out and buy one if you have the opportunity. More often than not, when I see these show up in cigar shops, usually they're limited quantities. The cigar shop doesn't get very many boxes. You have to be a big Fuente account to get these to begin with. The larger you are, the more Opus X and Añejos and rarities you get. But generally, when these show up in cigar shops, it's not uncommon to see a little sticker on the box, you know, limit 2 per customer, and then cigar shops do that so that everyone can get a chance to get these rare cigars, and one person doesn't come in and buy them all up. But they're all Dominican cigars. They all come from, or this is all Dominican tobacco. It comes from the Fuente factory in the Dominican Republic, and they're aged tobaccos. There's a lot of specialness about the cigar that I don't want to get into because I'll wind up getting really, really long. But the cigars are nice and bold. They are definitely full flavored. They are definitely full bodied. This isn't the type of cigar that you want to smoke early in the morning. I did, and I paid for it dearly. When my daughter was born, I left the hospital that night, and I came home to take care of the dog. I let my wife and my new baby daughter get some sleep, and first thing in the morning, I woke up, I got a shower, and visiting hours weren't going to start for another couple of hours. Fortunately, when you're a father, they let you go right in. But I wanted to let my wife sleep a little bit. I knew she was going to have a rough night getting up constantly to feed my daughter. So I sat down at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, all cleaned up, ready to go over to the hospital, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to have that special occasion cigar, because I didn't have one yet. I didn't have one the night before. I came home and went right to sleep. But anyway, I was rooting through the humidor, and the first cigar that catch my eye was the Opus X. I thought, you know, it's a special occasion cigar. This is a time to celebrate. So I sit down, I light up the Opus X, and I felt like I went green. It was such a powerful and bold cigar. It was just not meant for that early in the day. I wound up getting breakfast, getting a second shower to sort of wash off the wave of nausea, and then I went over to the hospital and stuff. But definitely not a cigar that you want to smoke early in the day. This is definitely at earliest an afternoon cigar. If you're fairly new to cigars, or you lean more towards medium-bodied cigars, if you want to try this, try it after dinner in the evening when you can sit down and relax, maybe have a drink with it. I particularly enjoy coffee with these cigars. I think the black coffee has a nice, rich kind of bitterness to smooth out some of the spicy components in the cigar. The cigar, it reminds me of It's got some woody flavors, a lot of spiciness. It's very bold, and you know, I just think this cigar goes really well with coffee. But again, I don't want to get too long on this particular piece. But anyway, if you're interested in trying the Fuente Opus X, do me a favor and contact my preferred retailer, which is Mike down at Buckhead Cigars in Atlanta, Georgia. You can get in touch with Mike a variety of ways. You can pick up the phone and give him a call. His phone number is 404-844-0400. If you're interested in picking up some other stuff from Mike, you can head over to askthecigarguys.com and look at everything that Mike has currently on sale. Now, it's not a list of all of his inventory. You can't order online, but it is a place to look up pricing and see what Mike has on sale. As I mentioned, the cigars, or before I talk about that, you can also reach him on Twitter at Buckhead Cigar, and he's on Facebook and Google Plus as Buckhead Cigar. But anyway, this cigar is listed as $20.75 due to a large Georgia tobacco tax, which increases the price substantially. And I'm sure that if you were looking to get a 5-pack or an entire box, you know, Mike would obviously drop the price due to volume. I'm not quite sure what he would drop the price by, but if you're interested in trying the Fuente Opus X, I would appreciate it if you supported someone that supports me, which is Mike at Buckhead Cigars in Atlanta. So not only would you be supporting a fellow cigar guy, Mike is also a big gun guy too. So kill 2 birds with 1 stone and support my preferred retailer. Well, for the discussion topic of the episode, I want to elaborate a little bit on the informal shoot/match that I did this past weekend. And I know you're thinking, I'm going to bore you to death by telling you how cold I was and how it was kind of fun, but it was really laid back and informal. But that's really not the case. I'm going to talk a little bit about Glock, which could kind of be a hot button issue for some people, but just listen to me and you can understand where I'm going with this. So anyway, I went to this informal shoot over the weekend, and I mentioned that I picked up my buddy Scott to carpool over there. So we're in the car and we're driving over there, and we get to talking about guns a little bit. Obviously, we're going to a shoot. Guns are going to be the topic of discussion on the way over there. But he had made mention to me that he was going to the match without his Glock 17. He's having some Duracoat work done on it with some graphics and stuff like that. He's having it all tricked out. But so I said, well, what are you shooting if you don't have your usual Glock 17 that he uses for USPSA? And he said, well, I brought 2 guns. I have a Browning high power that I'm going to use a little bit, and I brought my Glock 35. Well, okay, that's kind of cool. So we get to the match. We shoot the match. He does part of the match with his Browning high power, and he does part of the match with his Glock 35. Well, after we get done shooting and the informal match wraps up, we decided to hang around a little bit and do a little bit of shooting. And he had me shoot the high power. He said, hey, you want to give it a shot? Sure, I've never shot a high power before. Absolutely. I'll deal with the cold. I'll rub my hands together, get feeling back in my fingers, and we'll give this thing a shot. And I wound up really enjoying it. It wasn't completely comfortable in my hand. The hard grips were kind of biting the web of my hand just a little bit, but I did really well with it. I held a nice tight group, or smallish group, at 25 yards without any problem at all. First time I picked up the gun. Being an older gun, it was a lot like my Beretta 70S, where it really hammers with recoil. Not that the recoil is overly tough or hurts my hands or is too hard or makes the gun fly around. Those older guns seem like it seems like when the gun goes off and the slide comes back, it comes back and slams, completely back, and then goes forward and slams really hard, and you get this kind of violent jarring action. Whereas newer guns feel a bit softer, I guess because of the way the recoil spring works or the recoil mechanism works. But the Browning high power, even though it kind of slammed in recoil, I think it was really manageable and kind of fun to shoot. But that's kind of not where I'm going. After I get done shooting the high power, he asked me if I wanted to shoot the Glock 35. And I was kind of hesitant because, I didn't want to burn up a bunch of his 40, and I didn't have any 40 with me. But he kind of thrust the gun at me and had me give it a try anyway. Now, if you dig around in the archives, and look for older video and stuff that I've done, I talked about my first range gun and how I became a Smith & Wesson M&P shooter. Basically, I went to a cigar shop. Yeah, I went to a cigar shop. I went to a gun store, and I started handling different guns. Before I got there, I was doing research, and I was almost positive that I was going to buy a Glock. I was going to buy a Glock 17. Well, when I got there, the guy behind the counter put a couple of guns in my hand, and had me close my eyes, lift the gun up to a comfortable position, and then open my eyes and see where the gun fell in relationship to my hands or my eyes. And in the case of the Glock, it was kind of twisted. Naturally, I was aiming off target by a considerable amount. The M&P, when I opened my eyes, the sights were lined up and it felt perfect. It was comfortable in my hand, and I wound up walking out of the store as an M&P owner. And I haven't had much experience with Glock since then. Actually, it wasn't before then, maybe a year or two before that gun shop trip, I had a little bit of experience with I think it was a 45 Glock, probably a Gen 1. So my experience was really limited, and shooting the Glock 35 was the only experience since that time that I got a chance to put any rounds through the gun. I mean, I've been in gun shops and picked them up and handled them here and there, but it was the first time in a long time that I actually got to put rounds through the gun. And as soon as he handed it to me in my hand, I thought, wow, this gun feels light, it feels comfortable, I can reach all of the controls. And as he was loading up a magazine, I'm racking the slide and dry firing it, and I'm thinking, wow, you know, this gun feels really good. This isn't what I remember. You know, it points right, and I like it, and I can't wait to shoot it. So I put a magazine in it, and I started putting rounds downrange. After a magazine, we go down, we check the target, and, you know, I'm spread out a little bit at 25 yards, but it's completely manageable, and I think I did fairly well with my first experience with the Glock 35. The shots were all in the IDPA center ring, spread out all over the place, but they were all there. And I went back, I tried it again, and I think I wound up putting like 28 rounds through the gun or something like that. And, you know, the dark side started calling me. I was like, wow, you know, I think I kind of want to buy a Glock now that I've had a chance to shoot one, now that I'm more proficient with shooting. I guess the grip angle, now that I'm shooting more, I'm holding the gun higher where I'm supposed to. I've got an aggressive support hand in there to fill in the space in the grip, and the gun just feels more natural now as opposed to before when I wasn't really being aggressive. Now everything just feels kind of good. The only thing I didn't like about the gun was it had an extended mag release on it, which protruded quite a bit from the frame. And that first shot, the first thing that went through my head was, "Ow, that hurt!" And I guess it was just the way that I was gripping it. That extended mag release was really biting into the meaty part of my support hand. Then I was fidgeting, trying to get my grip right. But other than that, you know, I kind of liked the gun. It was really nice and fun to shoot. It was kind of weird getting used to the sights. He had Savigny sights on it, so the rear sight was very minimalistic. It's just black with a cutout in it, no dots, no serrations. It's canted a little bit so that you don't get a glare. And, you know, the front sight has serrations and a big bright green fiber optic piece in there. And it was kind of difficult getting past the plain rear sight because I'm so used to seeing two white dots and then a white dot out in front in my M&P. But, you know, aside from that, I really liked it, and the dark side is calling me. So when my buddy's Glock 17 gets back, I want to run out to the range and shoot it a little bit. If I don't have the issue with the mag release digging into my hand, which I shouldn't on a stock Glock 17, from what I understand, there's an extended mag release on the Glock 35 because it's a competition model. If the Glock 17 is comfortable and I don't have that mag release digging into my hand, I think I might look at maybe picking up a Glock 17 at this point as a backup gun, because I really want to have two, with me wanting to shoot numerous matches next year. I want to make sure that I have a spare gun in case the M&P goes down. But at the same time, you know, there is some potential for it becoming my primary gun. I love the M&P, but it's kind of grating on my nerves. I had a dot pop out of the rear sight. So I had a black dot, a white dot, and then out front it was pink where I repainted it. So I repainted the rear sight white. It's not nearly as white as the stock paint, but I'm back to having 2 white dots and a pink dot. But you know, it's just kind of frustrating having that front piece of front sight dot pop out, then having the rear pop out, and then I had issues with rust on the slide, which wasn't entirely Smith & Wesson's fault. Their finisher had a bad batch, and I had a gun that was in a bad batch, so I kind of let that slide. You know, I had some rust on the magazines. That little bit of surface rust turned into some more surface rust, and much like the surface rust on the slide, I didn't contact Smith & Wesson right away about it. It took a little while for me to get angry enough to finally say, you know what, I'm sick of looking at this rust. I'm going to call Smith & Wesson, and I'm about at that point now with the magazines, so I'm going to call them at some point this week, I hope, find out what I can do to fix those magazines if they won't replace them for me, because the surface rust will have to be sanded out, and then I'm going to have bare metal exposed, I would imagine, which is going to have to be coated in some fashion. So, you know, it's all these little things that are kind of nitpicking and annoying me about the M&P. I really like the gun, but after shooting that Glock, I was really impressed. The trigger was nice. The reset was phenomenal compared to my M&P. The M&P is kind of, when the trigger resets, it's not really defined. It's kind of like, it's like gristly almost as it resets. It's not real positive, so it's more feel than anything, and sometimes you miss it, or sometimes I miss it, and I kind of short stroke it. In the case of the Glock, it was really loud. I could hear it over my ear protection. I could hear the pop as the trigger reset. It was nice and positive. It felt like a really hard click. The gun was ready to go again. Very apparent that everything was reset. So, I don't know. The dark side is calling me. I'm really considering getting a Glock. And it I don't know, it kind of breaks my heart to think that I'm going to set the M&P aside, and the thought of getting a stock Glock 17 and having to replace the sights on it, because everyone complains about stock Glock sights. So I'm assuming that they're going to have to go, and I have to upgrade to something like Savigny sights or Waring tactical sights. You know, it pains me to think about having to buy a new holster, replacement mag pouches, and spare magazines for a brand new setup. I mean, if I did not have any issues with the M&P, if I could get this magazine issue straightened out, and I don't have to worry about that anymore, and I don't like the Glock 17 as much as I think I'm going to, I wouldn't mind getting another M&P at some point in time, so that everything was kind of universal. I had all the magazines, I have the mag pouch already, I have the holster already. So, you know, there's comfort in sticking with M&P because I already have accessories for it, and I don't want to have to start all over again buying Glock accessories and Glock mags and things like that. So there's definitely some things that are holding me up in saying, you know, I want to go out and do this, but I don't know, man. The dark side is calling my name, and I'm seriously considering going Glock. At least at first as a backup gun, but if it shoots as good as that 35 did, I could definitely see it becoming primary for USPSA. So there are my thoughts on the Glock 35 and why I want a Glock 17 at this point. So I'll let you know how it goes with the Glock 17 when it comes in and my buddy's got free time. We can get to the range and do some shooting. But that's going to do it for the discussion topic. Alright, well, I'm getting dangerously close to an hour and a half, and I don't want to kind of drag this out any longer. So, with that said, I want to do the whole spiel at the end of the podcast where I thank you for sitting through, or I shouldn't say sitting through, because that makes it sound like work, and I want you to enjoy the podcast. So I want to thank you for watching / listening to episode 20 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltandPA.com. If you're interested in getting in touch with me or commenting on this particular episode, you can do it in a variety of ways. You can comment direct on YouTube if you found it there. I don't keep up with YouTube as much as I should. However, if you definitely want to get my attention, comment on my blog, WaltandPA.com, and I will be sure to either acknowledge your comment or answer any questions that you may have. If you have a suggestion for the show, you can contact me in a variety of ways. If you have a question or a comment, or you would like to see something changed or in addition to the podcast, you can reach me via social media. I'm on Twitter as @WaltW. I'm on Facebook and Google Plus as Walt White. I'm on the Pennsylvania Firearm Owners Association forum. I'm on the Gun Rights Radio Network forum. If you'd like to send me an email, you can do so at walt@waltandpa.com. And again, I'll do my best to get in touch with you. So again, thank you for watching episode 20, and I will catch you next time.